He laughed, a short, polished sound that bounced off marble and glass, then faded when a screen decided otherwise. Arya Nolan had pushed open the Grand Crest doors that morning for one simple reason. She needed to know. The city air bit at her cheeks, her coat was thin, and a card with her mother's handwriting was folded in her palm, like a small promise. "Keep it safe," her mother had said before she left, and for weeks that card had been more talisman than paper. Arya only wanted to see a number. Could it buy a meal tonight? A bus ticket? A little breathing room? The bank swallowed up noise. Sunlight leaned through the atrium and turned every surface into a stage for shinier things. Men in dark coats moved with polite indifference. Screens hummed. In the center, near one of the customer service kiosks, Maxwell Grant sat in the kind of leather that seemed to have been designed to make people notice it. He drank his coffee the way people drink rumors, slow, and with a smile already forming at the edges. Arya's cheeks were dusty from the walk, her hair pulled back in the hurried way of someone who had learned to keep things tucked away. She approached the counter as if stepping into a different climate, where every breath was measured. Elena Rohr, the teller with kind eyes and a steady voice, noticed her immediately. Elena's hands moved with the everyday efficiency of people who see all sorts of arrivals. When Arya laid the worn card on the counter, Elena's glance softened. She didn't ask where Arya had slept, or how long it had been since she'd eaten. She simply slid the card toward the reader. Across the room, Maxwell watched the exchange with the casual interest of a man who had seen almost everything. His laugh came before the scene unfolded fully, half amusement, half disbelief, because in his world, a homeless child at a bank counter meant paperwork, or a misunderstanding, or an awkward moment to be smoothed away. He expected an apology, a bemused shake of the head, maybe a kind bus token. He did not expect a secret sitting quiet on a plastic card. If this story already touches something in you, if you believe kindness can change a life, tap like. The teller did the usual, a small, practiced slide, a soft light on the scanner. Elena asked the quiet questions, name, birthday, like a song you listened to twice to be sure you heard it right. Arya answered without fuss. Her voice was small but clear. She spoke the name her mother had taught her, the one written on the back of the card. Maxwell's amusement lingered on his face long enough to be seen, a smirk that said he had seen quaint things before. Then Maxwell leaned forward, more curiosity than malice in his motion. He wanted to see this, perhaps to confirm his expectation. He crossed to the counter and, with the impulsive confidence of someone used to getting answers, reached for the screen himself. Elena hesitated for barely a heartbeat, and then stepped back. She could have handled it alone, but there was a moment when bystanders decide whether to huddle and watch or to turn away. The room leaned closer. Maxwell touched the terminal like someone pushing open a door. The machine hummed, a light blinked, and the screen refreshed. Numbers rolled into place. An ordinary sequence at first, then a figure that did not fit into the neat little world he had made for himself. The expression that had been a soft laugh broke, like a glass losing its rim, and left him open-mouthed. The room registered the same way, an intake of breath that sounded like a small wind. The balance on the screen read far beyond what any of them expected. It was not a fortune that promised instant bliss or cures for pain. It was a careful, deliberate sum set aside and waiting, quietly generous, unmistakably protective. For a long beat, no one spoke. Maxwell's laugh had evaporated. His posture tightened and then softened in the same motion, as if the numbers had unmoored something he had held as certain. Elena found her voice first. She explained, with the kind of restraint used by people who carry other people's stories gently, that the name next to the account was Victor Hale. The man had been gone for years, a quiet presence in the neighborhood once, remembered by a few homeowners and the local grocer. When he passed, those who knew him only whispered that he'd quietly made arrangements to thank the woman who had, years before, sat with him in his small kitchen and listened while he talked about the war and his regrets. Arya's mother had been that listener. "We don't have to go into details," Elena said, not for the bank, but for the stillness the number had created. But Mr. Hale set aside a fund. Someone made sure this card came to her. Maxwell's face did not rearrange into saintliness. He did something quieter. He put his coffee down and moved closer, not in a showy, headline-friendly way, but in the awkward intimacy of a person learning how to behave when a simple assumption collapses. He offered a sandwich from the cafe counter, then another, as though feeding someone might stitch the shock into something manageable. He spoke softly to Elena about making sure Arya had water and a chance to sit. He asked a question about a guardian, not because he wanted control,
but because his amusement had been replaced by a new, resolute concern. In another life, he might have shunned involvement. Today, he found himself volunteering his office to help arrange practical things: a place to sleep for a few nights, a lawyer to ensure the money would be protected until appropriate guardianship was set, an advisor to teach basic financial safety if that's what was needed. Arya absorbed these motions with the same careful attention she gave the rest of the world. There was no wild weeping, no immediate belief that every problem had been solved.
She accepted the sandwich with a small, almost surprised thank you, and sat down to fold the card between her fingers as if holding a companion. Her first reaction was not to dream big, it was to steady herself enough to breathe. She asked practical questions: if she could get a warm blanket, if the bank would allow her to call someone, and Elena answered. Words like trust, beneficiary, and arrangements circulated, but what mattered most was the kindness threaded through them: a warm drink, a promise of listening, the offer of protection. Maxwell watched her and saw how dignity moved in her face. He remembered his own mother's hands years ago, and the way small things had once made a world. The change in him was not theatrical. It was visible in the way he no longer minimized her presence. He sat down across from Arya, careful, deliberate, and asked her, without the weight of curiosity or spectacle, about the woman who had told Arya to keep the card. When she spoke of her mother, her voice was steady but thin with memory. Maxwell listened. It was a simple human act, and in that listening a kind of atonement began, not because a number on a screen paid off years of loss, but because someone wealthy enough to have scoffed had chosen instead to be present. The bank staff moved with efficient tenderness, and the routine procedures they followed were practical and immediate. Someone called a social worker who could help with short-term arrangements. Someone else made a list of resources nearby: a shelter with beds, a clinic that would come through for a basic checkup, a youth outreach program that offered mentoring. None of this was a cure-all. None of it promised to erase the past. It did, however, offer a shield for the coming days, while the paper part of life caught up with the human part. When Arya finally rose to leave, she folded the card and slipped it into the inside pocket of her coat. The sunlight outside was different now, no brighter, but different in the way the day looks after something heavy has shifted. She did not skip, she did not laugh aloud. She walked with a small new steadiness, as though a room inside her had rearranged itself to fit a possibility she had not been able to imagine before. Maxwell watched her go, and felt the odd hollow that comes after a jolt of recognition. He did not feel absolved. He felt responsible in a way that did not let him walk away. That afternoon, he called a colleague and arranged for someone to meet with Elena to discuss the immediate care measures without making a spectacle of them. He offered the bank's facilities to help coordinate. He also handed a check for immediate needs, a pragmatic, contained action rather than a headline-making donation. It was the kind of help that acknowledges dignity while acknowledging that money is only one piece of a larger puzzle. Outside, the city breathed around Arya. A dog barked in the distance.
A cyclist passed by and glanced at the card tucked against her chest without understanding its weight. She stepped into the cold and pulled her coat tighter, feeling the card through the fabric, the way you feel a small stone in your pocket, a thing you do not look at all the time, but know is there. No one in the bank that morning left unchanged. Maxwell's smile had broken. It would not knit back the same. Elena went home at the end of her shift with a quiet gratitude for doing what her job required and nothing more: listening, protecting, being present. For Arya, the number on the screen did more than buy meals. It gave her time and a network of people who promised to stand up for her while she learned what could come next. The card that had been a scrap of paper became simply a key to patience. Its value was not only in currency, but in the way it turned strangers into temporary stewards of a fragile future. Between the bank's marble and the city's grit, an unexpected generosity that no one had predicted threaded itself into a life that had been managed as if it were invisible. She had walked in to check a balance. The millionaire had laughed. Then he saw the numbers, and the laugh stopped. What followed was not a fairy tale unraveling every hardship, but a sequence of human choices, small, practical, and compassionate, that opened a door where there had been a wall. What would you do if you discovered a miracle when you least expected it? Tell us below, and if this story moved you, share it with someone who believes in second chances.